need things to be changed, then we can definitely help with that, and we can talk about that. Make sure we have the correct information. Once you're at the point with your compensation to sign, you want to make sure that is it. We do recommend not changing your compensation amounts when you get to legal. And there's a few reasons why. One is that when we work with a family to match you with, and that you get to choose your family, they also agree upon your compensation. And so they are going into legal with already budgeting what they've already seen and agreed upon, and that you agreed upon. Changing some of these things can throw a wrench into the relationship. And we have seen matches break at legal because additional things were brought into play. Sometimes it's important during your match meeting to go over, if you're wanting a doula, if you're wanting anything extra that you will not be paying for out of pocket, you want to make sure that you talk to your parents and that you all agree upon that at match meeting. We usually will make notes, and that will be sent to the legal team of your choosing at that time. So let's go through compensation. Now, this is not every agency's compensation. This is not every independent person's compensation. What we're going to do today is just go over a summary of what we believe are some basics. If yours looks a little different, that's okay. If you're comfortable with it looking a little different, that's okay too. We're just giving you a standard, and you can go from there. You can remove things, you can add things. That is between you and your match if you're going independent, or you or your agency. The first thing that you'll always see is a reimbursement for base compensation. What that is that's for the pain and suffering and living expenses that you endure while being pregnant. We all know that pregnancy is not always the funnest, whether or not we love pregnancy and delivery. I myself do enjoy it. There are still some inconveniences. And so for your time and the pain and just all that goes with pregnancy, this is what your base compensation is. Now, our way of doing base compensation is that we pay a certain fee at the time of a HCG confirmation. So a week after transfer, you will do your blood work. If you have a high level and the doctors feel that that looks like a successful pregnancy, they will have you go back 2 to 4 days later, making sure that your numbers have risen in a proper form and a proper amount. And at that point, that's where we consider pregnancy. We would be able to turn that into escrow, and you would be able to get that reimbursed, or you would get that compensated right away. The next time that you will receive a small compensation is going to be at heartbeat confirmation. Heartbeat confirmation is about 4 weeks after transfer. Our goal with the base compensation is to pay you for for the weeks that you are pregnant. So at the time of heartbeat confirmation, you are 6 weeks pregnant, and you would receive 4 weeks of the compensation, basically the first month of compensation, 4 to 5 weeks. After that, you receive your payments on the first of the month. Base compensation is broken down so that it's normally about 9 to 10 payments. But in that aspect, it's 8 equal payments after heartbeat confirmation. And then that 9th and 10th are just one payment that was split into 2. The reason we do that is because a lot of effort and time goes into surrogacy, even to get to the point of HCG testing. You've had months of medical screenings and legal and traveling and different things that are requested of you. And so we want to make sure that you're compensated for that time. Same thing with heartbeat confirmation. We want to make sure that you're compensated, and that your compensation doesn't start at 12 weeks and you get paid for your one payment, and that would technically be for the first month kind of thing. So we want to make sure to be fair to you and also the parents. If at any point you were to have a miscarriage, and we never want to think about these things, but if there was to be a reason that the pregnancy was terminated, if it was terminated before 34 weeks, the compensation that we work with breaks down to be your base compensation divided by 40, which would be 40 weeks. And so if you were to have a premature ending of the pregnancy, say at 28 weeks, we would break down a base compensation of $50,000 divided by 40 weeks, and that would be $1,250 per week. We would take that 28 weeks, add an additional 4 weeks for rest and recovery and healing. And so it would be technically 32 weeks. And then your base compensation paid out would be $40,000. Now, 50,000 is for an experienced surrogate. Obviously, depending on where she's located, there's different aspects in this. And so that, I don't want you to think that's a first-time surrogate coming out of the bat. The parents that we work with are amazing, hardworking parents, but are on budgets too. And so the average that I've seen for first-time surrogates is anywhere from 25 to 35. And that's usually the average, about 30 to 35,000, I would say, across the country. Now, you may find agencies that are quoting higher amounts for base compensation. If that's the case, you want to make sure that the base compensation is not an all-inclusive package. I have seen many surrogates who have, unfortunately, went into a agreement thinking that they were starting with a high base compensation plus all the additional benefits, only to find out that all the additional benefits came out of that base compensation. So it's really important to read the compensations that you go through. It's important to look at them, understand them, ask your agency, your attorneys, anyone that you deem worthy and educated to be able to answer those questions. Now, if for some reason, and I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe that about 2 to 5% of the time an embryo will split, or some surrogates and intended parents feel comfortable transferring 2 embryos. And in those situations, there is a multiple pregnancy fee. Now, I've seen it be between $5,000 and $10,000. It really depends on the location, depends on you and your experience, and also your personal feelings about that. So in the event of multiples, most times the contract will state that you will receive X amount of dollars. And at the 20th week, you will start to receive it in increments broken down into 5 payments until the remaining amount of your pregnancy. This compensation should be paid in full at the time of your delivery, as long as it falls in line with the timelines that you guys have in place in your contracts. Insurance. Life insurance should always be mandatory. Now, this is a lower life insurance amount of $350,000. It depends on what you're comfortable with, what the parents are comfortable with. And during this time, I've seen, insurance policies go from $350,000 to $750,000. It really is what you guys decide upon and what you sign with your agency. In these, there's always going to be a beneficiary of about $100,000 for the parents. Now, this is just in case that something was to happen and be able to help them with the possibility of maybe having a future journey or family. This does not happen often, but it is important that you understand that this is a pregnancy and there are risks involved. And so speaking with your family and talking about these kind of things is also really important. Most times the insurance agency, the surrogate agency will pay for, we'll set up your insurance. The parents are going to pay for these items, but they will set up your insurance for you. If you have an insurance broker that you are already familiar with and that you want to work with, if you have an insurance policy in place and you just want to gather a rider, those are all important things that you can discuss with your agency at the time, or your parents. Medical insurance. If you do not have a surrogate-friendly medical insurance plan, intended parents will get an insurance plan for you to cover the pregnancy. If you have an insurance plan that's surrogate-friendly, parents will pay the co-pays and the deductibles of your insurance plan. If you request them to pay the premiums because you picked up a plan during open enrollment, then that is another option too. If you do not have surrogate-friendly insurance, they will purchase a surrogate-friendly insurance plan and they will pay for the premium, the deductibles, and the co-pays. Expenses and reimbursements. So most times you'll have a monthly expense allowance, and this monthly expense allowance can cover many different things. It's a set amount that happens and it starts to be paid out after your legal signing of the contracts and getting ready for transfer. That amount will cover things like postage, vitamins, faxes, gas for appointments that are less than 60 miles from your home. If you have a quick appointment, maybe a small amount for childcare or different things like that. This is so that you don't have to gather every single receipt you have for those things that are $10, $20, $15, $30. It's so that it's easier for you and the parents. Now, some months you may use none of your monthly allowance. And some months you will use more. And so it's definitely important to look at that, to even keep track for yourself. But you want to know that this is allowed to be a non-accountable monthly expense. Maternity clothing. Usually at the 12th week, you will receive a compensation in the amount of that's agreed upon that covers your maternity clothing. So if you need all of that, then you're able to use it. If you only need a certain amount of it, say maybe just a few $100s to cover, the expanding body that you have and that growing baby, then that is okay too. You can request, you don't always have to take every compensation. It's there that if you need it, it's there for your protection. It's there to help you and your family. But if it's not needed, you don't feel necessary, you don't have to request that. Injection fees. A lot of times we will see in compensations an injection fee. On the surrogates, medication fee is when you start the actual injections, getting ready for the transfer. And this fee is just to help you as you progress with all the work of shots. I personally have done 3 surrogacies. And so I think I estimated that I probably was close to a whole year of shots. And that's not fun sometimes in your hip and your butt or your stomach or wherever your doctor chooses to have the injection. The next one is going to be your embryo transfer fee. And that embryo transfer fee is it's set up to help with any costs that could be associated with the transfer for you. So things like the mandatory bed rest for those 2 days, lost wages, childcare, everything like that. With ours, it includes the first 3 to 4 days. So, if there was a reason that it was extended or things like that, then you would be able to have additional coverage and additional costs reimbursed. Whenever you're traveling to, your intended parents are going to cover airfare, transportation, food per diems, anything that could come into those costs, parking, tolls, those kind of things will be to discuss further down, but you want to make sure those are in your contracts and in your compensation agreements, because those are going to help to protect you. Mock cycles. Some clinics require a mock cycle, or some parents, request a mock cycle. And so for that, there is usually a mock cycle fee. There's also a drop cycle. If you have begun your medications, not including birth control, and the cycle is canceled for no fault of your own, maybe it's the clinic or the intended parents, there is usually a fee for the drop cycle, and then you would start over with your injections. An invasive procedure fee. This usually covers for things like a DNC, an ectopic pregnancy, reductions, those kind of items. There should be some type of invasive procedure fee. And those usually happen when you're put under. So if you're put under for a procedure, then you would receive that fee along with things like your lost wages, transportation, airfare, all of that still would be covered too. The hysterectomy fee. In case of a full or a partial loss of your reproductive organs, most times there is a fee for that. A lot of times people will get life insurance plans from third-party organizations that specialize in surrogacy, and they do have a rider, which is called a lost organ rider. For a fee, the parents can add that to your life insurance, and that covers up to $5,000 for a partial and $10,000 for a full hysterectomy. And in those cases, your agency would help you if that was to happen. They would help to call the insurance and then to follow up with that to make sure that you're reimbursed for that. While this doesn't happen often, it does happen. And again, this is a reason why it's important to make sure that you're ready for surrogacy and you understand the risks. Even though it's a small portion, it still happens. And so that's important to follow up on. Now, there normally is a C-section fee. If you require a C-section that's non-elective, there normally is a fee to cover things like housekeeping, childcare, and just your healing process and your recovery process. I have seen in some agencies where if you've had previous C-sections, 2 or more, that fee may be lowered or reduced. If you're not comfortable with that, you can talk to them about that. But that is something that we have seen. There's also a bed rest fee. You want to make sure that you have a bed rest fee, and it normally will cover things like housekeeping and childcare. It does not cover your lost wages. Your lost wages will be an additional amount. And this is just to have so that you can compensate the people that will be helping you if you ended up on bed rest. There's also a housekeeping fee. And normally we see this happen at about week 24. It's an amount that happens monthly to be able to help you so that if you needed help around the house with your bathroom or cleaning or things like that, that it's getting a little harder to do as you progress in this pregnancy, there will be a small compensation for that you can then use to pay for help around your house. During this surrogacy, there is a child care reimbursement fee. If you needed to travel for the medical clearance, if there was additional days for the transfer, if you had to be in the hospital or doctor's appointments or court appearances, there are different things that you are needed and your children are not able to go to. That's why it's really important to make sure you've got reliable childcare. You have people, friends, family, or reliable professionals that can help you in those aspects, because there will be times where you will have childcare reimbursements and you will need childcare. Most times we see on the long distance traveling that if you are traveling by car over 60 miles after your legal compensation, has been signed, then they will reimburse after that 60th mile at 58 cents. Before your legal compensation being signed, you will be reimbursed at 58 cents a mile of driving time for starting at 1 mile. And this is just a normal thing that we see across the board. And this will cover for gas, wear and tear on your vehicle. Now, if you instead choose not to use your own car and you've requested a rent-a-car and this has been agreed upon ahead of time, you would not be able to receive your mileage reimbursement and the rent-a-car. You would receive the rent-a-car and the gas reimbursements for the rent-a-car. If you're using your own vehicle, then you would receive the 58 cents a mile. For long distance traveling, surrogates and her companion will be entitled to $50 per person per day for food. This is not a invoiced or where you need to turn in receipts. This is something that would just be paid to you to cover your food for the travel times. We do put in here just a note. While it's not part of your compensation, it's important to note that there are travel restrictions with surrogacy. If you want to learn more about travel restrictions, we can talk about that when we talk about legal. With surrogates, lost wages. Now, there are a lot of times where you may have to take off work. During the first part of the process of going through transfer, you will have multiple labs done where you need to get blood work done. You'll also have outside monitoring appointments or appointments with their clinic to check your uterus, to check the linings, to make sure everything is progressing well. And during those times of those, quite a few appointments in a short period of time, you are covered for lost wages during that time. You also will see that most agencies will offer 4 to 6 weeks and sometimes maybe 8 weeks of maternity leave, depending on the circumstances of the birth. That also is covered by the intended parents with your lost wages. Now, if you have an employer who covers lost wages, or you're in a state where there are programs that cover your lost wages at a certain percentage, the parents would pay the difference of that percentage. So if your employer covered 50%, then the parents would cover the other 50%. So it's important to know your employer benefits going into this. Your domestic partner lost wages. So domestic partners are able to get reimbursements for court appearances, invasive procedures to be your support person. If you had your embryo transfer, vaginal deliveries, or cesarean deliveries, there is in place protection for them. Also, attorney fees. The intended parents will pay for your attorney fees. You will have 2 sets of attorney fees. The first one is going to be your GCA at the beginning. And then if you're in a pre-birth state, there will be a pre-birth or a post-birth. And that again will be covered by the parents. You get to choose your attorney though. I just want to make that note. There's also a breast milk fee. With the breast milk fee, that is something that you decide on with the parents ahead of time if they are going to be requesting breast milk, if you are comfortable pumping, if this is something that's available to you to be able to do. On top of the fee for pumping, you will also have covered cost of shipping, the boxes, any of the equipment or supplies that are needed too. In our packages, we have a couple things that are just additional, and different places have different things. Wellness programs. So we do have a wellness program that starts from the time that you are cleared and ready to start with your matching process. They work with you one-on-one to create any type of eating plans and diet, and exercise or relaxation. They don't expect you to eat grass. They don't expect you to run miles. They really meet you where you're at to help you with the progress. Obviously, pregnancy brings on weight and different body pains. And so they're there to support you and to help with easy workouts that will help you to make labor easier in the end. They also will help you with postpartum. And so they follow you through your pregnancy all the way through the 4th trimester. So the 3 months after postpartum, and they're there to support you along with our agency. We also do what is called a massage therapy package. These packages, like the health and wellness and the massage package, these are gifts from the parents. Sometimes it's nice to get flowers. Sometimes it's nice to get little things. I personally love these things because it's the parents gifting it to me to help me with the pregnancy, to help me in my own personal life. At the end, in the last trimester, I do appreciate those few massages that I'm able to get. I do like to see a chiropractor. I pay for that personally out of my base compensation. Any additional things I pay, if I wanted to see a massage therapist more, I would, I take care of that on my own. I account for that in my base compensation. But this is a nice little gift that parents are saying, hey, thank you for all your hard work. We really appreciate you. We hope you're being supported and that you're getting, what you need to have a healthy pregnancy. So that's kind of how our compensation works. It's definitely a lot to take in. It does change and it does vary depending on who you are working with. If you're going independent, please understand too that if an agency has a compensation package and you'd like to change that, maybe you don't need childcare, maybe you don't need I'm trying to think, like the childcare or the health and wellness program, let your agency know, let the parents know, because that does help them too. If you say, hey, I think that I would need, X, Y, and Z a little bit more, talk with the agency, talk with the parents, so that you guys can come to that agreement and to understand. The first time I went through surrogacy, I did not realize the cost of surrogacy. I had looked at my compensation. One, I didn't realize you could get compensated. That's how long ago I did this. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But I also didn't understand that there was so much more. Your average compensation is your base plus an additional 10 to 15, depending on circumstances. But I didn't know that there was embryo creation, attorneys, agency fees, that there was health and, like your health insurance. I had no idea about that. And, surprisingly to me, when I found out the average journey cost 100 to 150,000. So while we know that surrogates deserve their compensation packages, we also understand that if you're like, hey, I'm okay doing it, I'm okay with this amount, or I do need this. It's just communication is so important. Sadly, I've seen, in different circumstances with independent matches or matches where people get to legal and they didn't talk about any of this. The parents didn't agree to what you wanted and you didn't know and agree to what they wanted. And that's heartbreak, because at that point you guys have matched and clinics have approved records. You've went through the medical clearance process and you've been into this process for several months now. And so I know that feeling. I personally had to walk away from my first match when I was going through surrogacy. I was much younger. It was probably about 7 years ago. And I didn't pick the right agency for me, and found out that we weren't going to be a match and that not all information was shared. And so I know that feeling as a surrogate, wanting to help a family and being a people pleaser and wanting to just bring joy to the world, and having to walk away. It was crushing to both parties. We did it, still had a friendship, but it did change things. And so please make sure you're communicating with your agency when you're going through these things. Please make sure that you're communicating with your parents if you're going independent. And then when you do your match meeting or when you're talking with the agency, make sure that the parents are agreeing to and that there's some type of signature or something, so that everyone knows they're on the right path and they're all in the same, understanding, during that match meeting and then moving into legal. I'm Ashley from Surrogate First. If you have any questions, you can reach out to our website, which is www.surrogatefirst.com. We have so much information on there. The breakdown of our normal compensation for our agency is on there. There's also a frequently asked questions. There is a amazing intended parent calculator, so that if an intended parent, if you're watching this and you're trying to figure out compensation, you're trying to figure out the cost of your journey, you can visit our site and actually plug in numbers, play with those things, and get a report that can kind of give you an overall view of what surrogacy may cost for you. Same thing with surrogates. If you're interested in seeing what the full cost is, you can definitely play with that too and see that. We are here for you. We have, we are here to answer questions. We do have consultations available on our website, so you can schedule a time to talk with a surrogate. I highly recommend research. If you want to learn more about surrogacy, there is a talk to a surrogate on our site. If you want to learn more about the intended parent program, you also are able to have a consultation with intended parents or even with our coordinators, where we can break down the process for both sides. We are here to educate, we're here to support. And so anything we can do, we would love to help. If you do have questions and you would like to email, you can email us at info@surrogatefirst.com, and we will be here to help. Thank you for your time.